for the same price. One firm said it plans to put 100,000 Elvis buttons on the market within a few days. Some of the items were turned out within hours after word of Presley's death was first made public.
I've been very upset since I heard the news, and I just can't believe it. I just wish he would come back.
And in many parts of the nation, there were memorial services like this one in Los Angeles, attended by countless fans who still can't believe that the king of rock and roll is gone. Gary Shepard, CBS News, New York.
The body of Presley was carried behind the gates of his Graceland mansion. Those iron gates will finally be open to his fans now that he's dead. Throughout Memphis, flags were at half-mast. Thousands of fans tried to get one last glimpse of the man who pioneered the rock star mystique. One confidant told how he found the body.
Some songs we were going to do on the tour and everything. Not also ever.
Crowds gathered early in the day. Some of them brought flowers, and entire families stood waiting to be part of his last moment. Guards had difficulty keeping some fans from actually storming the gate of the home. One guard telling the crowd, "Please, for the family, go back." By late in the day, the gates were opened for only 2 hours, so mourners could get a chance to view the casket. One florist said that the city of Memphis had simply run out of flowers. Thursday, Presley will be entombed in the family crypt just a few miles down Elvis Presley Boulevard. It was only 19 years ago. That plot in Forest Hill Cemetery was a shrine of sorts for the Presley clan. His mother is buried there. She still gets flowers after all these years from people who love Presley and her. He will be buried next to her. Larry.
Christine, Dick Clark, whose own rise to prominence as a rock music impresario made him a professional contemporary with Presley, was never one of the Presley inner circle, but the two men worked together several times in Las Vegas. Clark says he was always amazed at that singer's effect on an audience, particularly in Las Vegas.
When you see what the man can cause, man never went anywhere without a coterie of friends, bodyguards and so forth. Everybody in that room, for the moment they knew, all the performers knew he was going to be there that night. You never saw 10 or 15 or 20 professionals get so nervous. But one man was in the room. The nice thing about it was when it was announced that he was there, he came and he spoke on the microphone, and nobody went over to the table, nobody bothered him, nobody bugged him. They had that much respect for him. But I've often thought he was a caged animal. I digress there to remind myself of that time, but you don't want to live that way. It's got to do crazy things to you. He was not happy in the last few years, and that was made me very unhappy that he was.
Still, the debate goes on. Was Elvis on drugs or not? Two ex-bodyguards, Sonny West and Dave Hebler, say he was a drug user, but that's not, they say, why they wrote a book about Presley. West claims Presley was a good man who gave in to drugs under pressure. In their book, they talk of the idiosyncrasies of Elvis, his fear of assassination, or his late-night trips to places as odd as funeral parlors. West tries to explain they are not here promoting their book, but trying to get straight their feelings about them. Here is what they said in a news conference in Beverly Hills today.
The reason that we are here is to, because we've seen some of the coverage on this, and we think that it's been entirely put in the wrong light by different individuals, and we'd like to see if somehow we can get it straight. All the time that he wasn't on that stage for that hour, I guess the man was just bored, and he was trying to find different things to do. He would get toys or things, grown-up things like three-wheelers, and ride them around Memphis just for an hour or so, just to get out. I mean, the man was limited. He could be in the middle of the crowd, and he could be lonely. He was one of the loneliest men I've ever seen in my life. And we tried to be with him and protect him and keep him happy as the best we could. I swear to God we did, man.
Can one of you tell us why you decided to write such a sensationalistic book about Elvis?
When we wrote this book, it was out of bitterness and hurt to start with. I tell you, when we were given 3 days' notice by his father and a week's pay, after 16 years, we all had families, and he wouldn't talk to us himself. He flew out of town, and he had his father do it.
Why did Elvis fire you?
At the time, it was told us by his father that there was a cutback on expenses.
In 1977, I started to feel like things were slowly getting out of control. My health was a constant problem. But what really shook me was a book by 3 of my bodyguards. It hurt me a lot that they would attack me in public. I never thought friends who once were almost family would turn and try to destroy me.
That it was because of the lawsuits.
Dave, you seem to be implying before that you were writing the book in part to try and get Elvis to change his ways. Is that right?
You bet. We wanted to point out to him, you know, what he was doing, not only to himself, but to the people around him. And we didn't want him to be what he was. We wanted him to be what we knew he could be and had been.
We were trying to present him with a challenge, because if he looked back and saw all these things roll in front of him and know that they were true, I don't know how he might have dismissed them in his mind as the years went by. Well, it wasn't like, and that's what I meant when I said maybe it will do some good for him, for the drug culture, for people to realize no one is out of reach of drugs, man. Here is a man that had it in the palm of his hand and started off with it that way, and the drugs took it away from him.
Was he hooked? What drugs are we talking about?
We're talking about uppers and downers. We're talking about sleeping pills. We're talking about things like Demerol. We're talking, yes.
You actually saw him take
Yes. My cousin Red charged in to stop it one time. I think he broke the guy's toe or something going through the door and told him that he was going to break him up if he didn't quit getting the stuff to him. And Elvis heard about it, and he called Red and Joe in. They discussed it for a while, and then finally he looked at Red and said, I'll never forget it. He said, I need him, man. I need it.
We wanted more than anything else to see him as he was in his prime, on the stage, just knocking him dead, you know?
If you loved him so much, why couldn't you protect him?
Of course, protecting. How do you protect a man from himself?
What drugs are we talking about?
Was he hooked? We're talking about uppers and downers. We're talking about sleeping pills. We're talking about things like Demerol. We're talking, yes.
You actually saw him take
Yes. Yes.
Was he a constant user of drugs? Is what you're talking about?
He would get on and off of them. As long as he took them and kept taking them over that period of time, I would think that the body would start deteriorating. I would think that the heart wouldn't be used to the up and down that it would be underneath the pressure from cocaine or from uppers and then back to a real low beat. I don't know. I think
cocaine. Did you say cocaine too?
Yes. No one is out of reach of drugs, man. Here is a man that had it in the palm of his hand and started off with it that way, and the drugs took it away from him.
The book, Elvis, What Happened, says the performer was a heavy drug user. The Memphis coroner says no evidence of any abnormal, illegal drug use. The whole matter might be subtitled, Who Do You Believe?
Friends of Elvis are saying tonight that a special crypt might be built so that fans can pay their respects. This mausoleum simply can't handle the crowds. Said a police official in Memphis, I'm afraid there are going to be people trying to get inside tomorrow and the day after and the day after that. There's nothing like an Elvis fan. Paul?
Still hard to believe he's gone, isn't it?
That's right. Presley's body lay in state in a 900-pound copper casket inside the mansion. Outside, more than 13,000 people, screaming, sobbing, fainting, gathered at the gates of the mansion hoping to view the body. At first, the family permitted just 2 hours for public viewing, but that time was extended indefinitely when only a few hundred people were able to get inside in that time. 50 National Guardsmen were called in to help control the crowd, but except for some pushing and some shoving, there were no incidents. However, it was 90 degrees in Memphis today, and many women in the crowd fainted. Most of those who entered the mansion went out crying. Meanwhile, Elvis Presley's countless fans continue to pour into Memphis by car, by truck, van, and motorcycle. Every hotel and motel in the city is full. Elvis Presley will be buried in private services in Memphis tomorrow. Paul?
Kelly, the man who conducted the autopsy on Elvis Presley said today that there was absolutely no evidence that Presley had a drug habit. Dr. Jerry Francisco told reporters today that if drug use was as severe and frequent as some people claim, evidence certainly would have surfaced during the 3-hour autopsy, but he also said it did not. Dr. Francisco's statements run counter to charges made by one of Elvis Presley's former bodyguards. Jim Brown reports. Jim?
Sonny West was a bodyguard for Elvis Presley for 16 years, and along with 2 other men who acted in that same capacity, provided facts on Presley's habits, including drugs, for a book titled Elvis, What Happened? The 3 were fired a year ago, although they still profess love for the man. At a Beverly Hills news conference, West was asked why he thought Presley turned to drugs.
I guess because he was bored.
John Wayne, Burt Reynolds, Anne Margaret, Charlie Pride, Caroline Kennedy, the daughter of the late president, Tennessee Governor Ray Blanton, many, many more paid their final respects. A few hours earlier, though, tragedy struck when a speeding car plowed into the crowd, killing 2 young women and critically injuring a third. The drunk 18-year-old driver has been charged with 2 counts of second-degree murder. But thousands more fans continued to pour into the area to line the route of the funeral procession, formed by the hearse carrying the 42-year-old singer's body, and then followed by a dozen white Cadillacs. The funeral services were carried out in extreme privacy inside the mansion, planned by the singer's father, Vernon Presley. The king of rock and roll, dressed in a white suit, pale blue shirt, and silver tie, all of them Christmas presents from his father. The funeral procession carried Presley to his final resting place at a nearby cemetery where he will be interred next to his mother. But not everybody mourned Presley's death. Valley News columnist Mike Wyma has received death threats over his column that called Presley a fraud and a crook whose only talent was the ability to memorize a 2-minute song. Wyma said he didn't like Elvis when he started singing and wasn't going to praise him just because he died. Well, 200 angry Presley fans jammed that newspaper's switchboard, among them a threat on the columnist's life. ABC's Rona Barrett, who made observations on Eyewitness News about Presley's alleged use of narcotics, has also gotten threats from anonymous callers. Indeed, the myth and the legend of Presley so dwarf the man, almost any man, that it may take years to find out, of course, what really happened.
Only relatives, close friends, and some celebrities were permitted to enter Graceland, the Presley estate, to witness the funeral services. Anne Margaret, Burt Reynolds, John Wayne, Chet Atkins, Charlie Pride, Caroline Kennedy, all were reported to be in town. As described to artist Ham Embry, Presley was dressed in a white suit, blue shirt, and tie. Presley's former wife Priscilla and his father Vernon were among those to view Presley for the last time. Among the pallbearers was one of Presley's close high school friends, George Klein.
He gave me a car once, and I said, Elvis, I don't have the words to express how I feel to you about you giving me this car. And he looked at me and he said, what is fame and fortune if you can't share it with your friends?
The somber funeral procession moved slowly down the driveway and out onto Elvis Presley Boulevard for the 3.5-mile drive to Forest Hill Cemetery. Just as it emerged, a young woman jumped in front of the hearse carrying Presley's body. Authorities pulled her out of the way. The police-escorted motorcade moved on without incident, passing grieving Presley admirers who had gathered lining the boulevard 5 deep. Still more thousands of Presley's fans were waiting when the procession arrived at the cemetery. Presley was to be entombed in this 1-story marble mausoleum. On the front lawn, flowers sent by the truckload by Presley followers were arranged in profusion. One was in the form of a 6-foot-long guitar. Presley's crypt is in the so-called Presley Room, where other family members will eventually be entombed. His crypt will always be visible to the public through a locked wrought iron door. Officials believe Presley will continue to attract in death many of those who were so devoted to him when he was alive. Ed Rabel, CBS News, Memphis.
They spoke of Presley as a hero, these people who stood for long hours under a hot sun to pay a final tribute. Most were simple working-class people, spanning all ages. Entire families came here, and they came from all parts of the country. Some of them simply dropped everything to be here, and many traveled for long hours just to stand and wait.
We left at 5:30 yesterday afternoon from Indianapolis, and we got here at 5 to 9 this morning. And even though I can't get in, this is the best I can do. I can be here.
How long did it take you to come down here?
12 hours. 12 hours, and it was 731 miles.
Early this morning, the crowd was shocked when a car drove into 3 girls outside the Presley mansion, killing 2 of them. Police arrested the driver on charges of second-degree murder and drunken driving. But the shock seemed to wear off, and at times there was almost a carnival atmosphere. Commercialism mingled with the morning, as hawkers sold Elvis Presley pennants and T-shirts.
You think you'll make a lot of money on this?
I don't know. You know, it'll be the first time I've ever made much money if I do, you know. Now, it's kind of enjoyable. It's something to do. You know, I think you're giving somebody something and you're getting something, too. I think Elvis would have probably liked it, you know.
But not everyone in the crowd liked it, and some even called the gathering a circus.
I think it's a bunch of baloney, really. People are just, they don't really care. They're just giggling and carrying on. And, you know, I'm having a good time, too, but that's not really what it's all about.
By tomorrow, many of these people will have gone back home. They all were touched somehow by the Presley magnetism, but very few of them got to see him for the last time. Only a glimpse of a hearse on its way up Elvis Presley Boulevard toward the cemetery. Chris Kelly, CBS News, Memphis.
Elvis Presley's fame was international, and he was mourned in Europe as well as in this country. John Lawrence reports on one scene in London today.
The tiny Christ Church at Cock Foster's in North London was filled to overflowing with mournful Elvis Presley fans this afternoon as an impromptu memorial service was held. A picture of Elvis was up on the altar, a place of adolescent and adult adoration he held for millions throughout Europe. Some of the teenage mourners had not been born when Elvis first achieved stardom. Others had already become adults by the time he sang Heartbreak Hotel. All shared the same grief and shock at the singer's death. The hairstyles, the clothing, and the working-class manners reflected the Presley style that so many had come to imitate in this country. In and outside the church, there were more than 500 people, some of whom joined to sing Amazing Grace. As the Beatles were revered in America, Elvis Presley was worshipped in Britain. John Lawrence, CBS News, London.
CBS News will present a special broadcast on Elvis Presley tonight at 11:30, 10:30 Central Time.
And I am helped in that by a touching column today by a good reporter here for the Associated Press, Linda Deutsch. Ms. Deutsch identifies herself as having been in junior high wearing penny loafers and poodle skirts during the mid-1950s, the president of her very own Elvis Presley fan club. When he died Tuesday, she writes, it was like losing an old friend who had shared my youth and my dreams. For the first time in my life, says Ms. Deutsch, I felt old. That's the key, I think, feeling vulnerable, feeling old. The way many people in their 50s and 60s must feel about today's news of Hubert Humphrey, that vigorous optimist. Not only does it not seem fair that his cancer has returned, it makes us all more conscious of how fragile all life is. I remember how the whole country shared those feelings in November of 1963, the awesome sense that life is short even for those who most personify glamour and youth. That long weekend after the Kennedy assassination, some perceptive things were said. Among them, a lament by Daniel Patrick Moynihan, then a member of the Kennedy administration, now a U.S. Senator. I don't think there's any point in being Irish, said Moynihan, if you don't know that the world is going to break your heart eventually. I guess we thought that we had a little more time, and Moynihan added, so did he. So it's a double kind of mourning when someone famous dies too soon. You think about the years that might have been ahead for him or her. You also realize how fast they're going by for you.
Elvis Presley was buried in Memphis. There were 150 invited guests and many thousands of fans. Some had stood or sat and slept in the streets all through the night. While the mourning was public, the services were private. Charles Murphy reports.
They knew they wouldn't get inside the mansion for the funeral, but Elvis's fans came anyway and waited for hours. They came from all over the United States. Most of them were young women. In the heat and excitement, a number fainted. The funeral, preached by television minister Rex Humbard, lasted more than an hour. Finally, the hearse bearing Presley's coffin wound down the driveway of Graceland onto Elvis Presley Boulevard. It was a white cortege, a white hearse, and 10 white Cadillacs. Elvis loved Cadillacs. He had a dozen himself. The cemetery was closed to the public, too, but still many people stood outside in the hot sun to see the hearse go by and to say that they had been here.
We did it to pay last respect to Elvis because we loved him. Loved him as a teenager, loved him as a grown woman with children of my own who also love him.
Why go to all this trouble?
Because we love Elvis. We still do.
You're not going to get in, you know.
Doesn't make any difference.
The front of the mausoleum was a mass of flowers. By early afternoon, 1,800 wreaths had piled up, and many more were still coming. The coffin was carried by Presley's closest friends and business associates. Besides family, mourners included a number of show business personalities who counted themselves friends, too. The thousands of other friends who had to wait outside could not come in today. but many said they would remain in Memphis until the cemetery opened so that they could visit his grave. Charles Murphy, ABC News, Memphis.
This is James Walker in New York, where Elvis Presley's fans have swamped record stores. One record company reporting nationwide sales since his death of 250,000 copies of his latest album, Moody Blue. The manager here said this store sold 5 Presley records last month and over 500 in the last 36 hours. What's it been like?
Astonishing, the amount of phone calls that started yesterday morning after opening up, of people asking what we have, how many we have in stock, specific ones, people almost crying on a telephone, crowds we had.
And crowds and buyers they had too in Chicago, where the demand for Elvis's records were equaled only by the demand for Mario Lanza's records when he died in 1959. Today there were few Presley records left, so too in Los Angeles. Almost everywhere there was a shortage, leading the RCA record company to increase production. Presley had sold over 400 million records by 1975. Record company executives believe the frantic sales will continue for at least 30 days longer. James Walker, ABC News.
This is Mike Taibbi in London. It is not surprising that Elvis Presley's death was followed by genuine mourning in England. Though the yearly rumors that he was coming to perform were never realized, he still managed to sell a staggering 150 million records here in just over 20 years. With his death, his records will sell at an even faster pace now.
Dreams could all come true.
A London Times columnist wrote yesterday that by the standards of today's rock stars, Elvis never did or said anything even remotely outrageous, socially significant, or even interesting. But to his fans in England, those apparent deletions in his persona did not matter, and in fact only added to the purity of his myth. An overflow crowd of Elvis fans jammed a memorial service in London's Christ Church today. Some were dressed in Presley garb and listened mutely as his songs were played. It is somewhat hard to believe that the 12,000 members of his official British fan club, most of whom never saw Elvis perform, view themselves as his most loyal followers and were grief-stricken at the news of his death.
Police kept the large crowds away from the gates of the Elvis Presley home in Memphis today, but thousands lined the street outside. Funeral services were held for Presley at the mansion he called Graceland, the home he bought for his late mother. About 200 friends of the singer crowded into the big stone house to hear services delivered by evangelist Rex Humbard and a local Assembly of God minister. The services lasted for over an hour. Some of the people who were allowed inside Graceland Mansion to participate in the private funeral service included actress Anne Margaret and her husband Roger Smith, actors John Wayne and Burt Reynolds. All joined the family in the long procession to Forest Hill Cemetery. The drive from the mansion up Elvis Presley Boulevard to the cemetery ordinarily takes a few minutes to drive. Today, the motorcade was repeatedly slowed by thousands of mourners who lined the 3-mile route and who repeatedly broke through police lines. It took almost an hour for the cars to reach the cemetery. There, the invited guests watched the copper casket being carried inside a large public mausoleum to a special family crypt reserved for Presley's body yesterday. It isn't known whether the body will remain there or whether a special burial place is being prepared, which would also hold the body of the singer's mother. Like her son, she died at the age of 42. Jackson Bain, NBC News, in Memphis.
The funeral procession of 49 cars was led by 10 white Cadillacs from the singer's mansion to Forest Hill Cemetery. Elvis Presley died at age 42, the same age his mother was when she died.
Presley's death brought on another tragedy early today. A hit-and-run driver who police say was intoxicated ran his car into the crowd of mourners outside the Presley estate. The accident killed 2 teenage girls and critically injured a third. Police stopped the car after a brief chase and arrested the 18-year-old driver and 3 girls riding with him. The driver faces multiple criminal charges, including murder.
Then the crowds were 10 deep in spots all along the route of the procession. Fans tried desperately to get one last glimpse of the rose-covered coffin. Only 200 people were invited for the special services, but the wails of his fans were the chorus for the eulogies that were going on privately inside the mansion. Outside the mausoleum, thousands of flowers ringed his resting place, most of them brought there by adoring fans who sometimes traveled from many states away. A lot of celebrities were there, but it was his day, and they came away ashen but controlled. Some fans, though, were in tears hours after the service was over, so he was laid to rest in a style that he had created, in a sense, with a diamond ring on his hand, an expensive suit, and a shirt and tie that happened to be Christmas presents from his father. And he was laid to rest very near his mother in that cemetery. Chuck.
The somber funeral procession moved slowly down the driveway and out onto Elvis Presley Boulevard for the 3.5-mile drive to Forest Hill Cemetery. Just as it emerged, a young woman jumped in front of the hearse carrying Presley's body. Authorities pulled her out of the way. The police-escorted motorcade moved on without incident, passing grieving Presley admirers who had gathered lining the boulevard 5 deep. Still more thousands of Presley's fans were waiting when the procession arrived at the cemetery. Presley was to be entombed in this one-story marble mausoleum. On the front lawn, flowers sent by the truckload by Presley followers were arranged in profusion. One was in the form of a 6-foot-long guitar. Presley's crypt is in the so-called Presley Room, where other family members will eventually be entombed. His crypt will always be visible to the public through a locked wrought iron door. Officials believe Presley will continue to attract in death many of those who were so devoted to him when he was alive. Ed Rabel, CBS News, Memphis.
Presley's fame was international. He was mourned in Europe as well as in this country. At Christ Church in North London, it was filled with adult and teenage mourners during impromptu services. Some of those had not been born when Presley first achieved his stardom, but the hairstyles and clothing reflected the Presley style that became popular also in England. The overflow crowd joining to sing a hymn. At 11:30, following the Channel 2 editorial tonight, CBS is going to present a half-hour special on Elvis Presley.
The first records Elvis cut for RCA, How